Good evening, everyone. On behalf of FDC Proxima, I welcome you all to this wonderful session on new paradigm in hematinics drug delivery for better absorption and lesser side effects by none other than Dr. Alok Shah. He is head of science technical marketing at Generics, and having a PhD in molecular biology from University of Iowa, postdoctorate from Rockefeller University, and has conducted extensive research on lungs, stem cells, cancer, and he was also an ex-professor at the University of Chicago. His papers has been already published in various scientific journals, including Science, Cell, PNAS, and many others. His research is extensively in the field of molecular biology, and today he is going to take us through uh, hematinics, what are the problems, and how the new drug delivery systems in hematinics can help better absorption so that patient can get a higher HB rise in shorter time duration and also can minimize the side effects. So over to you, Dr. Alok. The stage is yours. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Dineshji. I'm just going to share my slide and then I'll take us all through it. Like Dineshji, and I want to thank, of course, the team at FDC for hosting this lovely talk and for giving us a chance to talk about something that's novel, rather revolutionary, and is going to bring through a nice breakthrough. Also, I want to thank all of you today taking time on your Sunday to be part of this entire talk in this process. So over the course of the next 45 minutes or so, I'm going to introduce some new paradigms, a new product, one that is already changing the way we think about iron deficiency anemia and the way we will think about it. A little bit about me, of course. Dineshji already introduced me. So I'm the head of science and technical marketing at Generax Pharmacist. Generax Pharmacist is a 15-year-old company that specializes in bringing cutting-edge scientific breakthroughs from around the world into India for the first time. And so, of course, this is what we do, and then we market it in India. And we've had a really, really nice run of bringing great products into India. I was a professor. I was a research professional at the University of Chicago, where I focused on lung injury and did a lot of research on lung stem cells and cancer. I've published extensively, but today our focus is going to be entirely on iron and iron deficiency anemia, and that's the reason we're here. So let's get started talking about what are some of the current available iron options and what are some of the issues associated with them. Right now, the four major issues that pretty much most doctors face that have to do with compliance is a matter of, first of all, your bioavailability is all over the place. Depending on the iron salt, you're going to get less or more bioavailability. The second is there is often a lack of efficacy. So some salts work better than others. There is literally almost no one major gold standard. And the ones that work better will often give you really, really bad side effects. And now the problem with the side effects, of course, is at the end of the day, the patient for us is key. And we want to make sure that the patient has a nice balance of efficacy, bioavailability, and few or no side effects so that your compliance goes up. So a big issue is you've got reduced patient compliance. And that's something that hopefully the products and the ideas, the technology that I will introduce to you today is something that hits all four of these. So what is that? Well, why don't we first run through the mechanism? Because this is something that we're going to be coming back to a few times, and this is extremely important. So I'm going to use my cursor also to run us and to guide us through this. This yellow colored cell here is the enterocyte, right? So that's the enterocyte lining the intestinal epithelium, rather. It's the gut lining. And this is what's going to determine what gets into the cells and what doesn't, and what gets into your body. So usually there is a channel called DCYTB, and this converts ferric into ferrous. Your ferrous ion then gets absorbed by DMT1. This DMT1 channel is very, very important. That's at the apical or the top surface of the cell, and that's rate limiting. So not all of your iron will get absorbed, but some of it will. Now, because it's rate limiting, not all of the iron leaves the intestinal lumen, but some of it will. right? And it's the remaining iron that's in the intestinal lumen that causes a lot of the side effects and a lot of the problems that you see. So once the iron enters into the enterocyte, it often binds to ferritin. And then, other than ferritin, there is a protein called ferroportin at the bottom of the cell. And the ferroportin is how the iron leaves the cell. This is extremely important, and I want to focus on these two parts, on the DMT1 at the top of the cell and the ferroportin at the bottom of the cell, because DMT1 will determine how much iron gets in and ferroportin will determine how much iron leaves. Now, in cases of chronic inflammation, you've got a protein called hepcidin, which will bind to the ferroportin. And once hepcidin binds to the ferroportin, it blocks it. So in cases of chronic inflammation, like chronic kidney disease, or in many other situations of chronic inflammation, what happens is you can be taking oral iron, and the iron you take will be taken in by DMT1. You'll get an increase in ferritin also, but none of that leaves from the basolateral side of the cell. And this often can be the crux of the problem. So since it doesn't, it just builds up in the enterocytes. Ultimately, those enterocytes die, they're shed, and you're not really going to get an increase in hemoglobin. So my talk today actually is going to be focused, because one new way that the world is thinking about this right now is, yes, we can all talk about ferritin and we can talk about transferrin, and that's great. But we should be focusing only on hemoglobin, right? A lot of people do this bait and switch where they'll say, hey, look, the ferritin goes up, or hey, look, the transferrin goes up. But they don't talk about the hemoglobin. And that is what I am going to be talking about, because I think that is the bottom line and that is what matters the most. Ultimately, when your iron comes out from the basolateral side through the ferroportin, it's going to be carried by transferrin into your blood, and ultimately, subsequently downstream, you'll get a rise in hemoglobin. Now, of course, I don't think I need to tell this audience why that's important, because an increase in hemoglobin is what's going to be important for your oxygen carrying capacity. And when you've got iron deficiency anemia, which in India is a huge problem, that's something that we are hopefully out here to try and treat. So, what are the problems with current therapies? And I'm going to focus today primarily on oral iron and oral iron absorption. I'm not going to talk about intravenous iron. So oral iron, and some of the biggest problems with it, they range from metallic taste, they range from staining and blackening of your teeth, to the entire range of GI effects, going from an upset stomach to nausea to diarrhea, vomiting, dark stools, constipation, of course, feeling giddy, feeling faint. Also, the bioavailability is something that's a problem. Many times in pregnant women, now, pregnant women already might be taking quite a few supplements, quite a few things. They already have problems with palatability and taste. They don't want to taste something that's metallic. They don't want to take something that's going to make them, they may be going through morning sickness. They don't want to take something that's going to make them want to vomit, something that's going to cause nausea. So for all of these cases, very often what we're seeing is compliance goes down, and it goes down pretty drastically. Well, we've got a pretty good solution for that. And so I'd like to introduce FDC's product called VITCOFOL HB. And this is powered by the latest science and technology. It's a product, VITCOFOL HB, that contains SunActive Fe. And SunActive Fe is not your run-of-the-mill regular iron. It is a revolutionary new iron that is powered by microsomal technology. So the advanced microsomal technology is something that is at the crux of this product. Today, I will run us through that. I will also show you some clinical trials and clinical data from around the world. So why don't we just get started right into it? So let's talk about VITCOFOL HB, and let's talk about the underlying technology. This is a product from Japan. It is the world's most highly micronized. It is the smallest iron. It is extremely bioavailable. It is a proprietary technology of encapsulation where the iron will not get in touch with your intestinal mucosa at all. So you're going to get none of the side effects. You're going to get none of your gastric side effects either. You're not going to get metallic taste, and it works really well. You don't have to take my word for it. I will show you all the data. So there are no reported adverse events. It is something that's recommended by the WHO directly. The encapsulation is novel, and it goes through a different pathway. Doesn't go through the enterocytes that we were talking about. Instead, it goes through a different cell type called the M cells, the microfold cells. And this is the only proven ion that goes through the M cells and works in the pathway I will show you. More importantly, it is the absolute smallest ion you're going to find. And why does that matter? Well, let's talk about this microsomal technology. And VITCOFOL HB comes in a really nice offering. It's ferric pyrophosphate, which is the active iron salt. But remember, this iron salt, the ferric pyrophosphate, is not like other regular ferric pyrophosphate that you'll come across. It has been very highly micronized, and the size is extremely important. It has also been encapsulated with microsomal technology. So your VITCOFOL HB comes with ferric pyrophosphate, 30 milligrams of ferric pyrophosphate, and 250 micrograms of folic acid. So why is the size such a big deal? Well, regular ferric pyrophosphate is about 5.2 microns in size. SunActive Fe, so VITCOFOL HB, is the world's smallest micronized iron. It is under 1 micron in size. To be specific, it is 0.3 to 0.5 microns. You can see that in this figure. So the average size is about 0.3 microns. Ferric pyrophosphate is around 5.2 microns. And most other iron, encapsulated iron salts that you will find, whether it's liposomal iron or any other kind of iron, these are all 6 microns and larger. And I will tell you as we jump into the mechanism why this is extremely important. Now, we've also got data that talks about bioavailability. So if you compare it to most other iron salts, when you compare SunActive Fe, which is right here, this red bar, whether you compare it to just naked ferric pyrophosphate that is not encapsulated and non-micronized, whether you compare it to ferrous sulfate, whether you compare it to ferrous fumarate, ferrous lactate, electrolytic iron, or LipoFer, which is a liposomal ion. So this was a paper that was published actually back in 2004. And I want to tell you that the technology underlying VITCOFOL HB, which is SunActive Fe, this microsomal ion, it is the market leader. So the Japanese innovators are the innovator company that have created and invented this entire technology. Right? So back in 2004, they were able to show that this is so much better in terms of bioavailability. In fact, you can see it's about 3.6 times more bioavailable than ferrous sulfate, which internationally is the gold standard. In terms of in animals, in a rat study, they were easily able to find, so the area under the curve in this pink line, which is for SunActive Fe or VITCOFOL HB, is the largest compared to any of the other ions, whether it's ferric pyrophosphate, ferrous sulfate, or sodium ferrous citrate. So again, your bioavailability is extremely good, even in animals. And the reason for this, now I'm going to take you through the mechanism. So the reason for this is primarily the novel mechanism. The technology behind this is twofold. The first is the micronization. So I told you the size, 0.3 to 0.5 microns. The other thing is that VITCOFOL HB, because of the size and because of the encapsulation, the proprietary encapsulation, which is the microsomal technology, this iron goes through different cell types in the intestine. So in this diagram, the pink colored cells are your enterocytes, your intestinal enterocytes, which you can see here. On the right side, I've zoomed in on the diagram. The white cells are microfold cells called M cells. So these M cells that line the intestine are very different kind of cells. They're actually part of and they're associated with the immune system. The entire job primarily is to eat up small lipid particles or small bacteria. The novel microsomal encapsulation in SunActive and VITCOFOL HB convinces and to a certain extent tricks the cells into believing that this has to go through the M cells. So the M cells will swallow it completely. What does this mean? This means that your iron will not go through DMT1. And the DMT1 receptor, like I told you in the start, which lines the enterocytes, is rate limiting. So the amazing thing is you completely bypass the rate limiting step. SunActive Fe or VITCOFOL HB goes through the M cells, the microfold cells. Once it goes there, it goes into the phagocytes, gets eaten up by phagocytosis into the phagocytes. And because of that, it ends up going from the small intestine into the lymphatic system. So it goes into the lymphatic torrent from where it goes into the liver. In the liver, the iron gets uncovered and it gets to meet the blood. Ferric pyrophosphate has the highest affinity for transferrin of all iron salts. And that's because of the ferric pyrophosphate. The pyrophosphate, the three phosphate groups, is what gives us this amazing affinity for transferrin. So the nice and the actual revolutionary breakthrough is twofold. One is the size. The second is the fact that it can go through M cells and it can completely bypass your rate limiting enterocytes. Now, do I have any data that backs this? Well, we do. So there was a paper that was published, and I will get to that also. But before that, why is this so important? The truth is, if you dig online, after the innovators, after SunActive Fe and VITCOFOL HB came out into the market with a bang, you'll have other companies that are trying to jump on the bandwagon and say, oh, we also go through M cells. But if you go through the literature, and I've given 2 citations here at the bottom, that very clearly say that if you are trying to go through the M cells, the microfold cells, particles only below 1 micron in size will be able to go through the M cells. Particles that are larger than 5 microns in size, so between 1 and 5 microns, they will go through the M cells, but they go very slowly. It's extremely rate limiting. If you're between 1 and 5 microns, yes, you will go through the M cells, but even after you go through the M cells, you get stuck in the Peyer's patch, which is at the bottom. So you will not really go into the lymphatic system, you will never really reach the liver, and you won't get such a good effect. And in fact, if you're larger than 5 microns, you will not go through the M cells. Very little or none of the iron will get absorbed through the M cells. So the fact is that because we are 0.3 microns, it literally zips through the M cells like an express highway. Now, you don't have to take my word for it. I'm going to show you some data that back this up. Here's a study that was published in 2018, and this is very important because again, you're going to find a lot of other people that claim that their iron goes through M cells. And if anyone ever tells you our iron goes through M cells, just ask them one question: what is the size of your iron salt? If they don't know, or if they don't tell you, it's because they don't want to tell you. If it's larger than 5 microns, I would say just don't entertain them. Because as per what the literature shows us, if it is smaller than 1 micron, that's the only way it will work efficiently. So let me tell you a little bit more about the particle size. VITCOFOL HB containing SunActive Fe is the smallest particle size of iron that you're going to find. It's between 0.3 to 0.5 microns. Any other encapsulated iron, any other liposomal iron, all of these are between 10 to 15 times larger. So this is the one that is most optimized to go through the M cells. And the reason I'm harping a lot about the mechanism right now is because when we look at the clinical trials, it's almost going to look too good to be true. And it is because the science has been worked out so well over the years. So in 2018, an independent group in South Korea did this study where they looked at SunActive Fe, which is VITCOFOL HB, and they studied to see the pathway through which it goes. Does it go through enterocytes or does it go through M cells? And what they found is that, and they say it right there, the bottom line of the paper is, the SunActive products were determined to primarily be transported by M cells through the intestinal epithelium. So here it is, very clear proof that the iron goes through the M cells and bypasses the DMT1 receptor of the enterocytes. What does this mean? Well, this means that if all the iron is going through the M cells, you're going to have nothing left in the lumen. And the leftover iron that's there in the lumen because of DMT1 is what gives you a lot of your side effects. So safety-wise, this iron is fantastic. Now, when you talk about absorption through M cells, right? VITCOFOL HB not only proposes that the iron goes through M cells, it also proves it with the publication I showed you. Most others either don't propose this at all or will say it, but there's no backing. So what does this mean? Because the iron goes through the M cells, it is probably the safest oral iron you're going to get with 0 side effects. Yes, it's a bold claim to make that an oral iron gives you 0 side effects, but that's what I'm telling you. So VITCOFOL HB containing SunActive Fe has absolutely no side effects, and I will show you the data as well. So first of all, the bottom line here is the WHO has recommended this. And the WHO, in their guidelines on food fortification with micronutrients, very clearly talk about 3 points. The first is reducing particle size. So the micronized iron salts such as SunActive Fe or VITCOFOL HB with a particle size of 0.3 to 0.5 microns is something that has got an extremely high bioavailability, is what they say. And they say it is something that can be given to people and increases the absorption 2 to 4 times. In fact, the reference they're giving is a product that was fortified, milk product that was fortified. So the fact is something that can be used also for food fortification. But the point I want to make, recommended SunActive Fe, which is VITCOFOL HB. Additionally, of course, we've got all the usual safety studies that you would expect. We've got rat gastric tolerance studies. And so the example that I'll give you for that is here was a study where a bunch of doctors gave SunActive Fe or ferrous sulfate or sodium ferrous citrate to rats. And then they sacrificed the rats and they looked at the gut. They looked at the stomach and they looked at the intestine and they scored it. An index of 0 means absolutely no effect. An index of 1 means that there was some amount of hemorrhaging. An index of 2 meant there were small ulcers, and an index of 3 meant there were large ulcers. And SunActive Fe or VITCOFOL HB was the only one that gave an index of 0. Absolutely no side effects. Also, further on, acute toxicity studies have been conducted. Of course, Ames mutagenesis studies have been conducted. And what we find is the LD50 of SunActive Fe is 635 milligrams per kg. And we're recommending 30 milligrams. So it's nowhere close. So it's an extremely safe product. I will also just tell you that in all the studies that I will show you, there are over 10 published human clinical trials. This is probably the only iron that you will ever find where it clearly says that there were no adverse events reported. Absolutely no constipation, no gastric side effects, no metallic taste, no blackening of stools, no nausea, so no adverse events reported. So unlike most other irons, oral irons, whether they're encapsulated or regular, most of them will have adverse side effects in human studies. There are some that claim that they don't, but then they don't have the whole list of gastric tolerance studies or WHO recommendations. Here is one, VITCOFOL HB, that I'm telling you, you can safely give to pregnant ladies, you can safely give to children, you can give to adults, you can give to almost every age range. So let's talk about clinical trials. So I'm going to show you about 5 or 6 published human clinical trials. I'll start with the one that excites me the most, and then we will run through the rest. Many of these are studies that are done in food fortification. Of course, the first one is one that's done in the form of a capsule, and I'll show you all that as well. And like I told you, there are 0 side effects. And so it's absolutely no surprise that it is one of the leaders in the world, SunActive Fe and VITCOFOL HB. So let's talk microsomal technology in context. Let's look at some clinical studies. The first one I'm going to begin with. So just to show you, there are studies that have been conducted all over the world, including our very own India, right? So PM Modi ji says, be Atmanirbhar. Well, we've got an Indian study as well. There are studies carried out in Switzerland, Germany, Italy, Philippines, Japan, Mexico, and we'll run through many of these. Let's start first with the Italian study because this was one of the most recent ones. In 2018, a group in Italy looked at pregnant women, and here's the publication. And what they found is 50 pregnant women in their second trimester. So 50 second trimester pregnant women were given SunActive Fe, or as a comparative were given ferrous gluconate. And what they found, and this is really the bottom line that I want to give you all, in 30 days, in 1 month, they were able to find a 1.7 gram per deciliter increase in hemoglobin. So I'm not going to I'm not going to play any games and talk about transferrin and talk about ferritin. Let's talk about the bottom line. How much hemoglobin has got up? 1.7 gram per deciliter in just 1 month with a dose of 30 milligrams of VITCOFOL HB SunActive Fe. And you see, this is almost a number that you will not hear of otherwise in clinical trials. And I'll put it in context for you. Normally, when you talk about, so here is a meta-analysis that was conducted. If you look at the SunActive Fe, the 1.7 gram per deciliter, most other ions, including some of the ones that are used in India. So this was a meta-analysis. These are data that are from India, from pregnant women in India in their second trimester, 30-day study, looking at everything from ferrous ascorbate at 100 milligrams, ferrous sulfate, ferrous fumarate, all these three at 100 milligrams, ferrous bisglycinate, and ferrous and sodium ferritate rather at 30 and 33 milligrams. All of these give you about a 0.6 to 0.7 gram per deciliter increase in 1 month. SunActive Fe, VITCOFOL HB, is 3 times that at 30 milligrams a day. So you're talking about a product that is 3-fold better. And again, remember, 0 side effects, 3 times the efficacy. So here, what we are doing is we're really leveraging the technology of micronization that nobody else has been able to crack it this way. And of course, the technology of the novel coating, this microsomal coating, which is very unique to VITCOFOL HB SunActive Fe. Here's another study I'm going to talk about. This is the Indian study that was done. This was a study actually that was done in Indian children in pediatrics. And this study was done in 2007. And here they used sprinkles to treat children with iron deficiency anemia. And I'm going to show you the data. And it's pretty amazing. With just 20 milligrams of SunActive Fe, you see a 1.18 gram per deciliter increase. This was a big study. The number of patients was 432. So it's a pretty big sample size. And you see an increase in hemoglobin again, happening very quick and with a very small dose. This is something that you're going to see through and through across the board. As we go on, you're also going to see studies where the doses are getting smaller and smaller and smaller. But the largest dose I have is 30 milligrams and 30 milligrams in 30 days gives you 1.7 gram per deciliter in pregnant women, which is amazing. Here we're seeing about 1.18 gram per deciliter in infants, again with 20 milligrams. The next study, these are 2 studies. One was done in Japan, one was done in Germany. And again, here the amount of iron is very, very low because now this study we're getting into food fortification. The previous 2 were not in fortified food. They were in capsule form or sprinkle form. This one is in fortified food. So you're taking only 3.5 milligrams of SunActive Fe. Now that's really minuscule compared to a lot of doctors, and a lot of y'all are probably used to prescribing 100 milligrams of iron. Well, here we've got 3.5 milligrams of iron, and you're seeing that in 8 weeks or in 10 weeks, you get an increase in 0.7 gram per deciliter or 0.5 gram per deciliter of hemoglobin. So even a 10-fold dose of SunActive Fe is still giving you a significant increase in hemoglobin. So this was a study that was done in women in Japan as well as Germany. I'm going to show you the next study. Again, here this was done in school children. And these children, this was done in the Philippines. The Philippines is known to have a very high at-risk population of children that suffer from iron deficiency anemia. So here, in fact, Coca-Cola has also done this. Coca-Cola has partnered with SunActive Fe and has used Minute Maid, their flagship fruit juice brand, has fortified their Minute Maid and has given that to students, has given that to children in the Philippines. And so here you're going to see, again, if you look at the percent of anemia, at baseline, of course, it was 100% anemia. By the end of it, we're down to 13% anemia, 1-3. So this is really, really, I think this is pretty amazing. You've gotten rid of 87% of your anemia with just 2.6 milligrams a day, under 3 milligrams a day. So that is something that's pretty powerful. Let's talk about the next study. Let's look at hemoglobin again. Again, at the end of this treatment, the 2.6 milligrams of SunActive Fe that was given, you see an increase in 1.25 gram per deciliter in hemoglobin. So this is again something that is very startling. This is a great number, and this is in a period of 100 days. So in 3 months, with just under 3 milligrams, you're getting about 1.25 gram per deciliter increase in hemoglobin. One more study, again, looking at the Philippines and school children there. What you're going to find here is in 171 students, again, they'd given them rice that was, so either unfortified rice or rice that was fortified with SunActive Fe, VITCOFOL HB, and you have a 67% drop in anemia prevalence. Here, they had given them only 10 milligrams of SunActive Fe. So I just want to reiterate as we go through this, the dose we recommend is the dose that was used in the first study that I showed you, the pregnancy study, which is 30 milligrams, 30 milligrams of SunActive Fe taken once a day. Again, remember, it's got absolutely no side effects, so you can take it pretty much whenever you want in the day. And here in that same study, they are looking at normally in the control group, which is this blue line, you see that the hemoglobin drops. It drops by 2 gram per deciliter in 6 months. Whereas those that were given SunActive Fe, VITCOFOL HB, you're going to see that not only are you preventing the 2 gram per deciliter drop, but you're getting a 0.78 increase in hemoglobin. So you've got a total of about 2.8 gram per deciliter increase in hemoglobin in this group. And I want to show you one more study, of course, and this was done in Mexico, where they've given women SunActive Fe in their rice. And again, what you see is the anemia goes down very drastically. So you've got anemia going down from 21% to about 4% of the women were still anemic. This was just with 13 milligrams, 13 milligrams of SunActive Fe. This was done in 145 women. So overall, what I want to show you, of course, is we've got a fair number of studies ranging from, of course, food fortification, but more importantly, in the traditional form that we're used to, whether it's tablets or capsules. And what we see across the board in all of these, the best effects, the best results we're seeing at 30 milligrams, 30 milligrams. And just to reiterate, in 30 milligrams in 30 days. So you can remember 30 and 30 end up giving you a 1.7 gram per deciliter increase in hemoglobin. That too in pregnant women. Completely safe, no side effects. If you look at the physical properties, that will also tell you something about this technology. It does not separate. So a lot of people talk about encapsulated iron and liposomal ions and all these other kind of new ions that people are trying to come up with. But the bottom line is it all separates at low pH. So the second it reaches your stomach in the acidic environment and in your intestine, what's going to happen is the acidic environment is going to ensure that the coating comes out. So it's going to separate. Well, we have checked this. We have tested this for SunActive Fe. And what you see is in pH all the way from 3 to 7, you've got pretty much no separation. You can heat it to 80 degrees Celsius and you can heat it for 2 hours. And we've also got data that you can heat it up to 121 degrees Celsius. And you don't get a change in color. You don't get a change in ion separation. You don't have to worry about oxidization, which is probably one of the classic problems with iron. Now, the fact is, if it can be this stable, even to color change and to oxidation, that really tells you a lot of what's going to happen to your teeth, what's going to happen with the taste, what's going to happen in your stomach and in your intestine. So that's something to think about. And then, of course, this is something that is very prevalent around the world. And I will tell you, we feel very fortunate and very proud to be able to bring this into India for the first time, that too. And we're extremely proud to have partners like FDC that are so ahead of the curve and playing such an important role in bringing these cutting-edge products so that our mothers, our wives, all the women we know that get pregnant, or everyone that we know, care, and love about that becomes anemic, can do something to take care of themselves. So I'm going to show you some of the products from around the world that are being sold, whether it's in Canada, where it's sold as a 30 milligram capsule, Ortho Iron, or whether it's Forfero in Italy, Pregnamed in Poland, Actiferol as well in Poland. You've got liquid. So again, this is probably one of the first irons that can very safely and stably be made into a liquid formulation, can be given as drops, can be given as water, and you don't have to worry at all about oxidation. So in Australia, there is this brand called Liquid Iron, and they, the joke they like to make, or rather in their marketing, They say this is not liquid iron, but it's liquid gold because it works so well. You've also got a US product called Pure Encapsulations that sells the iron liquid. There are products in Japan, products in the UK. Swanson sells it as well. And products for kids, products for adults. There's a product called For Kids, and there's Ferrodep. All of these are being sold all around the world for and with SunActive Fe. You've got Purofur in Italy, Fermix in Belgium. So as you can see, this is something that is trusted really well and is being sold all over the world. Emo got Fort also in Italy, Kid Appetite. So the one thing that you will see across the board is you're going to find products that are geared to women, to pregnant women. You're going to find products that are geared towards kids. And you're going to find products that are just in general physicians for iron deficiency anemia. The good thing is this is so safe and so efficacious that it works really well for all three. So finally, I want to summarize a little, and then I think a lot of questions have been coming in, so I will take some of these questions. The summary and the take-home points that I want to leave you with is, first of all, size does matter. Anyone that tells you that their iron is larger than 1 micron in size, I don't think that's something that should even be entertained. So SunActive Fe VITCOFOL HB is 0.3 to 0.5 microns in size. The smallest encapsulated iron you're going to find, most highly micronized. The second is the microsomal technology, which means that it goes through a different pathway. It goes through the M cells, the microfold cells, which is where the microsomal name comes from, and also because it's micronized, and hence the microsomal technology. But it goes through the microfold cells, again, something that has been published and proven in the case of VITCOFOL HB, SunActive Fe. What you're going to find is it goes through the microfold cells, which means two things. Phenomenal efficacy. Pretty much all of the iron you take is absorbed, is gone to the liver, gets into the blood, increases your hemoglobin. The second thing, of course, is excellent safety. So that's the third point I want to leave you with, is the safety is so good that the WHO recommends it and the WHO believes in it. Well, a little joke aside, of course, right now, I don't know how we feel about the WHO, but this was back when the WHO's recommendations really did matter. But of course, if the WHO is recommending something, it holds a lot of weightage. Finally, the fourth and most important point, a lot of clinical data. A lot of people will market, a lot of people will talk, but I believe in science as a scientist. So I've shown you science along the way, every step of the way, and I'm showing you clinical data as well. Remember, the clinical trials very clearly show you that in 30 days, 30 milligrams of SunActive Fe gives you a 1.7 gram per deciliter increase in hemoglobin. So if you don't have a product that's giving you such a good iron rise, that too with zero side effects, well, it's time to at least give VITCOFOL HB SunActive Fe a try right now. So finally, a very important point, of course, is technology is our friend. It is not a foe. A lot of people are scared of changing. A lot of people are scared of trying something new. But this is something, given its safety studies, given the efficacy, I think we would be remiss not to give this a shot. We would be doing our customers, our patients, disservice by not trying this at least with them. So I want to remind you of the name, of course, once again, it's VITCOFOL HB by FDC. So please give that a try. And if you all have any questions, you all can contact us. But more importantly, you can contact the FTC team, who have been really, really good and have been leading this entire initiative, rather, to bring such good stuff into India. I'm now going to stop my screen share and we're going to take your questions. We've got about 15 minutes to take all the questions we want. So I'm just going to see what questions have come in and then we will talk about that. A very, very, very nice, point that has come through right now, which is, does the concomitant administration of calcium and vitamin D, does this interfere with the absorption? You know, it's great that you asked me this because I've got some great news on that front. We have the data that show that this iron, SunActive Fe or VITCOFOL HB, will not get inhibited by calcium. And I know that is something that's crazy Because over the years, I know when I was, studying medicine, I was told very clearly that uh, calcium and iron, the calcium will inhibit iron, it will inhibit the DMT1 receptor. So you cannot take both together. But we've got studies that show you, we've got product references also, where the iron and calcium are together, along with because they go through different pathways. Remember, the iron goes through the microfold cells, the M cells. So neither calcium, even if your DMT1 is not working at all, it will not inhibit it. The second thing, of course, that's phenomenal is we've got studies that have been done. I showed you two studies already that were done with, actually, I showed you one study that was done with milk that was fortified with SunActive Fe. Not only did the milk not discolor, so there's no oxidation going on, otherwise it would go black. But the fact is that there was an increase in hemoglobin in that study. So milk calcium did not inhibit the iron absorption either. So yes, SunActive Fe is probably one of those products that you can totally take. The other question I have got right now is, if we have got iron salts, how does it compare against other iron salts? Is it more superior than sodium ferritate? Is it more superior than ferrous ascorbate? That's the question I got. And I would say from the data that we have, the answer is unequivocally and absolutely yes. And what am I basing this on? Well, during the presentation, I showed you two slides. The first was the KECO2 cell bioavailability assay. And in there, compared to all the other 6 iron salts, it does better. But more importantly, the meta-analysis that I showed you in pregnant women in their second trimester for 30 days taking iron salts. And there we had sodium ferritate, there we had ferrous ascorbate, there we had ferrous sulfate, we had ferrous fumarate, and we had ferrous bisglycinate. And compared to all of these gave you about 0.6 to 0.8 gram per deciliter increase in Indian pregnant women in 1 month. That too at doses like 100 milligrams, and SunActive Fe at 30 milligrams give you 1.7 gram per deciliter increase. So 3 times the increase with 1/3 the dose. So that's again something to remember. The other point, so I've got a couple of questions about, of course, can it be taken on an empty stomach or even after meals? And what time of the day would you recommend to take it? Well, when, as physicians, you don't want to mess around too much. So I'll tell you the answer. The first answer, of course, is it can be taken with a meal and it can also be taken on the empty stomach. We have not heard or got any reports of any adverse events or any sort of adverse effects, whether it's taken on an empty stomach or whether it's taken with meals. But of course, I would recommend that whatever is your classic mode of prescribing the iron, you continue with that, because you don't want patients to be a little confused. But from a scientific and a technological perspective, it doesn't make a difference. So the next question I have got is, does it cause black colored stools? No, it doesn't. It doesn't cause any black colored stools. And in fact, that's one of the most amazing things. The other question, I think I wasn't maybe very clear about this, is what is the salt that is in VITCOFOL HP and SunActive Fe? Well, it's ferric pyrophosphate, but it's not like regular ferric pyrophosphate. It's micronized and encapsulated ferric pyrophosphate. So it is extremely, extremely effective. The next question I have is, how long can this hematinic be used? Well, there are studies that have used it for 6 months. There are studies that have used it for even longer. I think in general, you're not going to, if you're looking at pregnant women or if you're looking at children, you're not really going to need it longer than 6 months. The data are pretty clear that within 1 month, you're going to get a 1.7 gram per deciliter increase in hemoglobin. And in how long will you start seeing the effect? Well, that study, so that's the next question I just got. The study that talks about the 1.7 gram per deciliter increase in 30 days, they start seeing a 1 gram per deciliter increase in 15 days. So the truth is that you will already start seeing an increase in hemoglobin in the first 1 month. And then, of course, as you take it on, you'll start seeing an increase in hemoglobin in the first 15 days, in the first 2 weeks itself. And then, of course, as you move on to the next 2 weeks, you will see an increase. There's one more point I want to make very clear, and that is that this is a completely vegetarian product. VITCOFOL HB is 100% vegetarian, so you can use it for all of your vegetarian patients. Obviously, heme iron is not, and that's something to think about. So it's very important also to consider that. The next question that's come through is, oh, and this is a very interesting question, is how important is this? Is VITCOFOL HB SunActive Fe? How important and can this play a role in enhancing immunity? So I want to remind everyone there is a fair amount of data out there that talks about iron deficiency anemia and its connection to immunity. And right now, this is all the more relevant because we're all in the midst of a pandemic, and of course, hence this Zoom call, this webinar. But there is a lot of long-standing data that talk about when you're iron deficient, when you've got iron deficiency anemia, when your hemoglobin goes down. There are two things that happen. Well, your T helper cells, your B helper cells, your T cells and B cells both plummet, both go down, as well as there is a direct correlation with your thymus gland. So your thymus gland functioning doesn't occur very well. And in fact, I think as most of you physicians will also know, what happens is there's sometimes a correlation with inflammation and C-reactive protein as well. So all in all, your immune system and your immune health does go down when you've got iron deficiency anemia. In fact, there were at least 2 studies that very nicely showed in children who had iron deficiency anemia, their T cells and B cells were low. And then when they were given supplementation, when they were given iron for a month, their, of course, hemoglobin rose, anemia levels went down, and their T cells and B cells went up as well. So there is a very clear role, A, in immune health and iron deficiency anemia and iron supplementation. And B, there is a big role also for iron and the thymus gland. So the thymus gland functioning is directly correlated with iron and the amount of iron stores and the amount of iron you have in your body. I want to point out one more thing since this question was brought up in the time of COVID. Latest research as of 1 week ago shows that COVID-19, the spike protein resembles hepcidin. And hepcidin, if you remember in my talk, is the protein that is increased in inflammation that binds to ferroportin and prevents the transport of iron into the basolateral side in enterocytes. So it is postulated, right? We don't have that evidence yet, but we have the evidence that hepcidin, that COVID-19 spike protein resembles hepcidin. It is thought that this is going to prevent ferroportin functioning. So no matter how much iron you take orally, as long as it goes through the enterocytes, it will not come out on the other side. And this is where SunActive HB is completely different, because what it will do is it'll bypass the enterocytes, it'll go through the M cells. So again, it's something that can be very useful for iron deficient anemia patients, even in COVID times. And then the other paper that had just come out 4 days ago spoke about the importance of the thymus gland. There was also a New York Times article on this. It spoke about the importance of the thymus gland with reference to COVID-19. So there's a lot of data right now, and this is thought to be the reason why children and younger people are mostly somewhat better off when it comes to COVID-19 mortality, right? Their prognosis is a lot better. And that's because their thymus glands are pretty active. They're producing a lot of T cells. As you age, or if your thymus gland is not as active, you become a lot more susceptible to COVID-19. So this is where, again, we've got data that iron plays a very important role in thymus gland function. So yes, thank you, doctor, for asking that question, because I think it's something that is very important. In fact, that question has come in 4 times about SunActive Fe and immunity. So, of course, the other question that's come is this something that is SunActive Fe the only iron you need to give? And I would say absolutely, because one of the risks, so when I was in the US, right, and one of the problems we had in the US with giving patients intravenous iron is iron overload is a real problem, and it is a real thing. So which is why oral iron is something that has become popular. But of course, we've not had products that give such a great increase in hemoglobin. And if they do, very often they come with an entire bag of side effects. So SunActive Fe, of course, helps us bypass this almost completely. And I think that's something that is going to be phenomenal. Let me just look at the rest of the questions that are coming in. Can it be given to adolescent girls? Yes, absolutely, it can be given to adolescent girls. It has been given to adolescent boys as well. How is this different? Do we have Indian studies? Yes, and I had shown you the Indian study that was done in infants. Is the mechanism of absorption proven? Indeed, it is. It goes through the microfold cells, the M cells in the intestine, completely bypassing the enterocytes. So that has also been proven and published. Everything I'm talking to you about has been published, and I've shown you those published data. How is it different from other encapsulated irons? Well, it's very different in that it's got great efficacy, great safety, and of course, great proven mechanism that works. And let me see, for how many days can VITCOFOL HB be given? Well, it can be given for as long as you have got an anemia problem. The clinical trials that we have, the longest one was done for 6 months. And again, there were absolutely zero side effects, zero adverse effects reported for 6 months. So to me, I'm very convinced by this one. But I would say, since of course there is nothing, the safety parameters are so good, you should absolutely try it. What are the contraindications for this? Well, there are none that have been reported. And the reason I say this is because none of it is really present in your gut. You don't really have to worry about iron overload either, because you're using 30 milligrams of elemental iron, which of course isn't too much, but is good enough to give you such a good result. And someone just asked me to reiterate whether it works for immunity. So yes, it does really help with immune health, and I've given you a whole range of data. And thank you. I've got a comment that's come in also from Dr. Basu, who is saying that we've been using VITCOFOL HB, and within the first 2 weeks, we get a 1 gram per deciliter increase as well. There is no incidence. The other question that's come in is there an incidence of diarrhea and nausea with this preparation? And in all of the studies, remember, I have shown you studies with over 400 individuals, 50 individuals, 132. So overall, if you look at the number, it's over 1,500, between 1,000 to 1,500 people. And they have never reported adverse effects. They've never reported nausea, constipation, or diarrhea. So I think that's something that you do not have to worry about. Lovely. So I think that's pretty much all of the questions that have come through. And thank you so much for taking the time off on a Sunday, for giving me the opportunity. Thank you to the FDC team. Remember, VITCOFOL HB is a completely revolutionary product. It is powered by SunActive Fe. And thank you, FDC team, for taking this initiative and for bringing this product to India with Generex Pharmacist.
I thank Dr. Alok for this wonderful session and solving all the problems, all the questions you have taken, and all the scientific data with the reference points, with the diagrammatic explanations. It was really a wonderful session on this Sunday evening, and we're looking forward to many more such sessions from you. And I also thank all the other participants who has come and joined the sessions with us. Thank you so much, everyone. And remember the brand name, it's VITCOFOL HB. And I'm damn sure that in coming days, you will definitely try this out and give your valuable feedback to us, right? Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot. Bye.
Bye.